Good afternoon. This is a hearing of the Chatham Conservation Commission, a special hearing being held on May 30th, 2024, in accordance with the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Town of Chatham Wetlands Protection Bylaw and regulations. My name's Janet Williams. I serve as the chair. Today's hearing is being broadcast live on Channel 8 and is being recorded for the on-demand archives available on the town's website. It's being conducted in person, by phone, and by video conference. The agenda, instructions on how to attend, and copies of documents for review have been posted on the town's website, mytown.gov, which can be accessed through a link on the Conservation Division website. So to all participants, if you're attending by phone or online, please stay muted until you've been recognized to speak. If you're on the phone, you can mute and unmute by using *6. And if you're online and you're not a commissioner, we ask that you please keep your camera turned off until you've been recognized. You can indicate that you wish to speak by using the raised hand feature. And when you're recognized, please remember to identify yourself for the record. So that we have a record of a quorum attending today, I will now ask each commission member to indicate their presence. Vice Chair Karen Lattin.
Present.
Bob Rawls.
Here, present.
Mary Sullivan is not here today. Elise Gordon.
Present.
Cheryl Maservi is also not here today. Eric Hilbert.
Present.
And Associate Member Bob Delvecchio is not here today, but we do have a quorum. So there's no continuances or announcements because this is a special hearing. I want to just start by making a couple of things clear and providing some context for what we're doing today and why we're doing it. We had planned to do this yesterday, but for a number of reasons we had to reschedule it for today. I want to thank the airport team for having submitted all the materials in response to the materials that came in over the weekend. Even though we're not going to be addressing those matters today, we've distributed everything that has come in to all commission members for review. And we'll talk about scheduling a date for reviewing all of that material, hopefully on June the 12th. At the end of the regular hearing. So we'll try to do that. And then we are aiming to reach a decision document by June 26th. That's our schedule. We're going to try to stick to it. In order to get us there, we had a couple of issues to deal with off the bat, and so I'm going to turn this over to Vice Chair Karen Lattin, who has an announcement and a decision of her own to talk about. Karen?
All right, I received one of the many letters that were sent to homeowners in Chatham as a result of the Article 40 at the town meeting. As a result of that, I was not sure whether I needed to recuse myself or not from this proceeding. I spoke with the State Ethics Committee, and they told me there were really two issues. The first is whether I can benefit financially from the proceedings that we're considering, and whether I am immediately affected by this notice of intent. I do not feel that I have any financial interest in this proceeding since my home is about 2 miles from the airport. And as a result, what we're considering is directly around the airport, and it is purely wetlands and nowhere near where I would ever have any property concerns. So as a result, I do not feel I need to recuse myself, and I do feel that I can be objective. That's it.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any specific objection to Karen's continuing to participate in this matter? Hearing none, we will then proceed to keep going with Karen participating. I had said before I wanted to provide a little context. A couple of us have received questions from members of the community about why we are scheduling this hearing focusing on mitigation. I think it's a two-part question. One is they thought that it was a broader hearing which it was intended to be, but because we had to reschedule, we cannot go into the broader issues that we had planned. So in light of the fact that we have 1 hour, we thought that mitigation would be a good topic. The other part of that question had to do with why we were dealing with mitigation when we hadn't resolved the underlying issues yet. And the answer to that is that our statutory obligations, both under the Wetlands Protection Act and the Wetlands Protection Bylaw of the town of Chatham, really revolve around the three parts of wetlands protection, which is avoidance, minimization, and mitigation. So, for example, the performance standards for any activities that are being conducted in buffer zones, those require any kind of impact or disturbance cannot be permitted without appropriate mitigation. Our variance provisions provide that we must prepare for mitigations for the impacts as part of that analysis. And here we have a number of variance requests, so mitigation is very much a part of that. And our regulations on mitigation standards in the section 5.02 provide, and I'll quote, "Mitigation is compensatory in nature, intended to compensate for a proposed project's impacts to a resource area that are unavoidable and have been minimized to the maximum extent possible." So we're not skipping the avoid and minimize parts. We have spent a lot of time in the last 6 months at hearings talking about those issues, but today we're going to focus entirely on mitigation. So as we count it up and look at it, mitigation is required for the activity, the tree removal, in an area that's approximately 2.6 acres maximum, and maybe somewhat smaller than that, depending on when the work is scheduled, in the adjacent upland resource areas that we refer to as ORAs, the ORA to the vernal pool, the ORA to Bierce's Pond, the ORA to Emery Pond, the ORA to Black Pond, and the ORA to the Cranberry Bog, totaling roughly 2.6 acres of impact. So we've had a couple of preliminary conversations about the kinds of mitigation that we would consider to compensate for the impacts. I know that the NOI speaks specifically to invasive vegetation management as part of the proposal, and that kind of invasive vegetation management can qualify as a mitigation effort. I also noted that the vegetation management plan speaks to an approach that's referred to as integrated vegetation management as a long-term approach. That's an interesting thing to us. That would keep the obligation, the responsibility to maintain the invasive management as a long-term effort. Beyond that, we had some preliminary conversations about some further measures that we might take into account as mitigation. So at this point, I'd like to ask Adrian or Mark if they have anything different or new that they would like to talk about, or should we just jump in and go through the proposals that we've had so far? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Commission. For the record, this is Adrian Dunk from GZA. We are the environmental consultant for the town, for the airport. I think that your summary so far has been very helpful. The mitigation measures that, as far as I understand, I'd like to confirm our understanding, are already settled with the Commission, are that the town will, during construction, implement best management practices related to sediment and erosion control, perform the work during times when soils are stable, which is ideally going to be in the winter, because that also observes time of year restrictions that are already established by the Cape Cod Commission for the vernal pool area. The airport has committed to a review of the cutting area in the growing season after cutting occurs, with some adaptive management around native seeding if there are bare areas above a certain size. Based on prior experience, we do expect the existing native vegetation to grow very robustly, but should there be bare areas, native seed mix would be applied. And invasive species treatment in the aura where cutting occurs would be implemented with annual monitoring reports submitted to the Conservation Commission for 3 years. And the Conservation Commission has a invasive species management plan that we've already discussed with you all on the record for your review. And finally, signage around the vernal pool regarding that it's a sensitive environmental area. So I do want to confirm that those items, as far as I understand, are existing commitments made by the airport and accepted as part of the mitigation package by the Conservation Commission.
All right, let me just throw that open. That is my recollection as well. We've talked about all of those. We don't have any problem with those.
Correct, there's more, but I want to make sure that
at this point, right, let's, is everybody? Okay. I'm not hearing any objections, so I'm taking that as a sign that that is our collective recollection as well.
Fantastic. Okay. The 2 remaining components of the mitigation package are the airport committing to manage an equal area of jurisdictional cutting for invasive species management in areas outside of jurisdiction. So that would be for our year 1 work, an additional 1.4 acres of invasive species management located at least 100 feet from wetland resources. And then our understanding is that because the town tree mitigation bylaw did pass town meeting, that a monetary donation to that mitigation fund would be accepted by the commission.
Yep, that was the suggestion that we had made. We're glad that that passed for a number of reasons. This is just one of those. It seems appropriate that a payment into a fund called a tree replacement fund seems right. So, and yes, we talked about, we are happy to see included invasive management in an area equal to the impacted area, just beyond or adjacent to, but selected also with an eye toward areas where invasive vegetation has already been identified as being present that could possibly move into and threaten the area within jurisdiction. I don't know, I'd like to ask you what, from your review of the site, how feasible is that to be able to come up with, say, 1.4 acres in adjacent uplands that would be appropriate for invasive management?
Yes, so we have developed 2 draft figures. So I'm sharing my screen.
Okay.
This is the runway 6 end. So this yellow area that's hatched, that is the cutting area that's within the aura to the vernal pool. And then this little teal triangle and this little orange triangle.
Excuse me,
Yes.
it's the agent. You guys are discussing the case. We haven't even opened the hearing officially by reading the legal ad, so can we do that first before we do anything else?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. The legal
No
ad
problem,
for the,
Janet.
okay, go ahead.
No
Sorry,
problem,
Paul.
Mike. Yeah, no, these things have a life.
Yep.
So, on the agenda for today is a notice of intent for 248 and 438 George Ryder Road and 1652 Main Street, Chatham Municipal Airport, maps 9F, 240, 106, 438, 80, 1652 Main Street, parcel 0-2248, 18-K1, 438, 53-27, 1652 Main Street, DEP number SE 103658. The proposed project includes vegetation management required to remove obstructions within navigable airspace in compliance with Federal Aviation Administration FAA regulations. Thank you.
All right, so apologies for that, Paul. That was my oversight. I didn't have an agenda in front of me today, so.
No, not a problem, Janet.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, Adrian, you can continue, please.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so the areas that are proposed to be cut during the 2024 work that are within the aura is this yellow area with a hatch, this teal triangle, and this orange triangle. Based on a field review, we're proposing the additional vegetation management to occur between the vernal pool aura and the bike path along this length of the bike path past the runway 6 end and connecting into an area that's contiguous with the Beers' Pond aura. This is because there is an area of invasive species down here at the runway 6 end, so managing that within this area bounded by the bike path would be protective compared to some other areas near the vernal pool. And then creating this larger buffer to the small cutting zone of Beers' Pond, again, kind of connects in and creates a swath of invasive species management nearer to the airport and nearer to the resources. So that's the proposed additional vegetation invasive species management at the runway 6 end. Down at the runway 4 end, again here in this teal color with hatches, those are the cutting areas. So we are proposing an additional area of invasive species management here at the western edge of the cutting, and that was selected because it does have kind of a natural break here with the access path, which will be more protective of the invasive species management work, and it connects in with areas that are not going to be cut. So again, it can deter if there's invasive species present, it kind of knocks it back around the edges to be protective of the interior area. And then this larger invasive species management area around the home that's on the property was selected because it would benefit both the aura to the cranberry bog and the aura to Emery Pond. So that seemed like a good use of resources to protect both water bodies.
Okay. What's the difference between the teal and I can't tell if I guess it's sort of a pinky color, if that's hatched or not, because I'm struggling to see the monitor. Yeah, it's not clear there. So what is it?
So,
yeah.
Yep, the teal is the aura.
Yeah.
And then the pink within that teal is the portions of the aura that are proposed to be cut. So there's some existing trails in here that don't have trees, so there wouldn't be cutting there. This is the home and the yard to the home. Yep. So again, there's not trees for cutting in those areas. So the teal is the aura.
Yep.
The pink is what will be cut. And then the two orange outlined areas are where we're proposing the additional invasive species management.
Okay, so the additional invasive species management is it all entirely within areas outside of jurisdiction that are being cut?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. There's nothing up to the upper end there that is beyond the cut area where this is proposed. Yeah, that's
correct. And
okay.
Yeah, invasive species across the site. I mean, they are present, but they are in low densities. And because with the removal of the canopy, there can be robust shrub. There's usually robust shrub growth. It creates the opportunity for invasive growth. Yep. So that's why we want to target cut areas for invasive species management versus other intact areas that would be expected to have minimal or no change from nearby cutting.
Okay. I've got that basically. Let me open it up to questions from members. Go ahead, Bob.
Are you presenting, have you or will you be presenting the details of how you'll manage the invasives in those new areas?
So the invasive species management plan that we provided for the areas within the ARA has been presented to the commission verbally with slides, and then also a written report has been submitted that matches those slides. Because this is all upland, we would expect the same species, and therefore we would apply those same performance standards, same methods, and same reporting that the commission's already reviewed for ARA areas to our outside of ARA areas. So same methods you've seen before, just an expanded geographic area.
The same methods.
Same methods, same goals.
And
And
as I recall, the initial description, tell me how it's changed, if any, was 15 square feet of bare ground.
That's for the seeding.
Yeah,
So that's the adaptive management in terms of if there's 15 square feet of exposed ground, we would be applying a native seed mix, which includes shrub species. But for the invasive species management, it was going to be a pre-cutting survey to identify where the species are, establishment of monitoring points at a rate of 4 monitoring locations per acre that would be staked in the field for repeat measurement, treatment through primarily a cut and dab using herbicides that are identified by MDAR as more sensitive, and then removal of cut material with proper disposal. The disposal site would be identified by the herbicide, by the invasive species contractor to the Conservation Commission agent prior to beginning work. So then, yeah, cut and dab with removal of invasive species material, and then monitoring at those predetermined monitoring locations with a meander survey. The performance standard would be invasive species at existing or decreased levels. And we had proposed to complete the monitoring with annual reporting by the end of each calendar year to the Conservation Commission for 3 growing seasons or until the performance standards are met.
okay, so.
In the event,
No, go ahead.
in the event that a monoculture establishes and a foliar application would be more appropriate than the cut and dab, those areas would be demarcated on a map and again provided to the Conservation Commission for review prior to performing foliar application.
All right, so the meander part of it is where, could you describe that part of it?
Yes, so the plot surveys would be following the the Army Corps standards for different thresholds. So they would be looking at and characterizing invasive species within different radii to a point. But then the rest of the area would have a walkover survey to document if there's other populations of invasive species that would require any additional management, generally characterize which native species are growing and which invasive species, and be used to guide any future invasive species management if necessary. So we want to establish the plots so that we can look at trends over time, but then the meander survey, because we don't want to be tied to only a few points and miss a patch of multiflora rose because it's around the corner.
Okay, all right, so no mechanical removal.
There would be cutting prior to, for a cut and dab,
Right.
to decrease the biomass and decrease the amount of herbicide needed. But that would be the mechanical, would be the cut. We are trying to avoid ground disturbance.
Right, okay. All right, I have another thought, but I'm gonna let someone else speak while I gather that. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Elise?
I'll just follow on something that needs to be clarified for me. The cutting you're going to do, you say it's mechanical. Weren't we going to do hand cutting, or was that only selective hand cutting?
We had proposed hand cutting when we believed that no herbicide was allowed. However, as was clarified to us, herbicides other than glyphosate are allowed for use. And because that is more effective with a cut and dab versus repeated cutting, and it decreases the number of incursions into this area by humans, and we selected, we're recommending the cut and dab method versus a pure cut.
Okay. On the, I know we don't have this on the screen, but on in the vernal pool area, that'll probably be hand cut, correct?
That was going to continue to be cut and dab using Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program protocols for herbicide application near vernal pools.
Okay.
So that guidance document is attached to the invasive species management plan, and they developed that guidance document for vegetation management in rights of way near vernal pools with rare salamanders. We do not have rare salamanders here, but we still want to be protective, so we're going to follow their guidance
Perfect.
around the vernal pool.
And Adrian, thank you for your patience on the repeat questions from before. I really, really appreciate it. This is probably going to be another one of those. When we talk about the seeding in those bare areas, we've talked about seeding versus planting. I had that question before. Do you have any feel for when you do use seeding that has the mix that includes the bushes and all that stuff, hopefully, how long does that take to actually establish? Do you have a timeline for that kind of growth?
The seed mix typically has a variety of species, so it has some very quick establishing grasses to stabilize an area and avoid erosion. And then it has other species which sometimes take a winter stratification before they establish. So it's variable rates. Typically there is quick establishment by some seeded species with longer term establishment by other species.
Okay. And the bushes that are going to be freed up from the canopy that are already there will grow to their great height, as we've talked about before, too, right?
That has
Yeah,
been the
hopefully.
observation at other airports, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, how are you doing? I just want to clarify, as at the present, have you identified any invasive species? Or is this going to be
Yes.
you have?
We have not mapped where they are, but during our field efforts, we have identified low levels of invasive species throughout the area. So we've not identified, an area where you just look and you go, oh, wow, that's a huge stand of Phragmites, or that's a huge stand of multiflora rose. But there are some invasive species throughout. Primarily what we've seen is the Asiatic bittersweet, honeysuckle, multiflora rose is certainly present.
And which side is this? In the vernal pool area? I didn't really.
It's
Throughout.
Yeah.
It's throughout the
But also,
area.
you're also considering the invasive species that will grow after the trees are cut, right?
Correct. So there's some invasive species now, and so we want to manage the invasive species either at the same time as the cutting or early, or in the growing season right after the cutting, so that the existing native species have a competitive advantage, so that we're removing those invasives and allowing the native population, which is robust there, to grow and continue to establish.
Yeah, another question. When you say robust on the low growing shrubbery in the vernal pool, what is robust from considering what they are now?
Robust would be that we do expect them to grow both outward, larger, shrubbier, and also taller. So they are primarily high bush blueberry and sweet pepper bush. And so those can grow up to heights of 10 feet or more. And so we do expect them to reach those kind of larger growth rates when they have more sunlight.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Karen has her, go ahead, Karen.
When we're talking about invasive species management, if there's invasive species in the area that's within the aura, you're taking care of that, and this is in addition to anything that might be found in the area that is targeted for any cutting and other management, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And at one point, we had said, in addition to, invasive species management and contributing to this tree fund, that would there be a consideration to plant any understory trees or something as well in areas that might be, as you say, 15 square feet of exposed area. Is that now not being considered?
We are proposing seeding in those areas versus planting.
Right.
Again, studies of other airports have shown that when plantings have been required, they are often outcompeted by already established native species. So we are hesitant to go out there and plant shrubs and then have some type of survival performance standard. 80% have to survive, and then they're getting outcompeted by existing blueberry. And we don't want to, cut the existing species to meet our standards. So there can be some conflict there, which is why we're proposing this seeding. So it provides for, it limits erosion, it provides ground cover. And then if there's not other shrubs growing into that area, we are including shrubs in the seed mix. They would establish and grow. But if it just takes a couple years for the existing shrubs to grow and expand into that area, we're not setting up direct competition by going out and planting things and then watering them and mulching them and cutting other things back and doing additional management efforts when being a little more hands-off would lead to the same or a better result.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Did you think of your question?
It really was that was the thing that I kept chewing on in my head, is I thought we had originally discussed the idea of, and I thought we had a positive reaction from the concept of planting
Yep.
one-story trees. I'm not talking about shrubs. I understand your position on not putting in shrubs that would compete with the shrubs already there, but the idea was whether we could plant understory trees, think shadbush, serviceberry types of things, which would not, around here at least, grow too high so that they become obstructions, but yet would provide some sort of lower canopy to the area. That wouldn't have to be done where there's bare ground. They can be planted wherever we've cut down trees, basically, just in between stumps, as it were. So that was what I thought I guess that's what I thought we would be seeing a little of in your new or additional offer.
I thought we had talked about that, and putting other trees is the same conflict as putting other shrubs. We would, if there's already shrubs between the trees that are being cut. So if we were to go plant other trees, even if they were shorter trees, we are still planting vegetation that experience says will be outcompeted by native shrubs.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm going to refer to the plant people up here, but to me, an understory tree takes up about a square foot. And even if there are shrubs at its base, it's not going to provide a competitive problem for it. It's designed to grow above the adjoining shrubbery. So to my layman's perspective, it seems like it would be an appropriate addition to the amount of mitigation that's being offered and performed there. Anyway, it's just my.
Down
my
here,
pers-
no, I appreciate that. Down here at the vernal pool end, the maximum allowable heights are pretty short. So if our shrubs that already are there grow to 10 or 12 feet, for a lot of the area around the vernal pool, that is 10 feet or 15 feet is the maximum allowable height. It's 20 feet right along the edge of the vernal pool. But that does not create a lot of stratification of layers for a tree species to be, distinct from the shrubs, the shrub layer.
Right, okay, I get that. Well, if there are other areas besides around the vernal pool, maybe that's an option.
Down at the other end, at the runway 2-4 end, the trees are allowed to be quite a bit higher, which does mean that more trees will be left intact. So again, we are expecting more of a canopy to remain because some of our maximum allowable heights down there were 55 feet. So we do expect some trees to remain in these areas near the cranberry bogs. And then again, there's a shrub layer there that's predominantly native with low density invasives.
Okay. Are we going to talk, that's fine, your argument is not, it makes some sense, so whether I agree or not, it still makes sense. Are we going to talk about how much you're contributing to the tree fund per
Yeah,
tree?
that
Yes.
gets us right in there because it's actually related. Because I think we've reached agreement conceptually anyway, that it would be the inventory of the trees that have been removed, once that's prepared, and we understand that it's prepared afterwards, under the monitoring, et cetera, and then ratios applied to the extent that they're relevant to that to yield the number of trees. However, one thing to keep in mind is that if you were to reach the conclusion that understory trees are feasible in some of these areas, especially around the vernal pool, that a planting of those trees, a tree would offset any amount that you have to, you can make a combination of a payment to the tree replacement fund and or planting of understory trees in any way that makes the most sense that we could agree on. So it's connected to, but let's talk about that.
Yes. So I think our first question, we've talked quite a bit about what the tree replacement fund donation could be, but is there guidance in what passed for dollar value or for considerations? We just want to be clear about what did pass before we kind of make up new or different standards.
I will send you there's about a 5-page tree protection bylaw that passed. The tree replacement fund is a corollary bylaw that goes with it. They're related to each other. As far as I recall, the replacement fund doesn't have specifics in it about amounts. It is simply a revolving fund that is set up to provide for the purchase of trees and the planting of trees for projects, particularly where trees cannot be planted on site as mitigation. So it's a way of funneling money to get the planting done in other locations.
Okay. So in light of that, the airport would like to offer as part of the mitigation package a donation to that fund of $7,500 per acre of buffer zone clearing or aura clearing. So here in the 2024 work, that's 1.4 acres. So they would be offering an $11,000 contribution to that fund. Okay. If, in the year 3 to 5 work, prior to implementing that work, that's 1.2 acres. So they would donate another approximately $10,000 prior to undertaking that cutting effort.
So it's not, the payment is not then going to be tagged to the number of trees that are removed? It's, I was wondering about that, whether it's on a square footage, acreage, or number of trees basis.
Because of how this is all funded, and any mitigation is part of the grants that are applied for certainty in grant funding to the town, we are proposing an area-based contribution versus a tree stem-based contribution.
Okay. Well, I will turn to local horticulture expert and plant acquisition expert about whether, what is the, yeah, whether, what would $11,000,
Not much. How many, have you calculated how many trees per, area approximately?
We had discussed that at our last meeting. I mean, we have a couple example plots where we were
So we can
looking at
get
the
an
number
idea
of
of the-
trees,
of what
but it
we're-
was very much a rough estimate.
Right.
So I believe we were looking at our estimate indicated, I believe, 200 trees, but I would have to pull up the report. It's in
Yeah.
that tree survey report. I just don't have that in front of me right now.
bit more. I think that we, based on the plots and then extrapolating from that to the larger area, they came up with about 200 for the Aura to the Cranberry Bog, an additional 23 in the Aura to the Vernal Pool. That was most recently submitted in the Vernal Pool Tree Survey. And then another 9 in the Aura to the Emery Pond. That gets me to 239 of varying sizes. So at that point, but I think in that number, the minimum is 3-inch DBH, right? We're not counting anything below 3-inch.
And then the vernal pool, they really didn't have a count, right? 'Cause they,
We have
We
23.
just looked
Oh,
at that
okay.
closest edge.
Yeah, just,
we were
yeah, right, once you get further up the hill, we lose it. So,
so what is that average? per tree?
200, 230, 240,
It's called 250.
250 at the moment.
And the average caliper is?
They range,
They range, I would say
They
most
range.
of the trees, they do range. Most of the trees were in the 3 to 15 inch DBH
Well, you can't even buy a 15
category,
inch.
but
right.
You can't even buy a 15-inch. Usually it's 4-inch, 6-inch calipers. Yeah, I don't really have much to
What's
say
the
to
price of an oak tree at wholesale?
4-inch, say.
the price of a 4 to 6 foot tall native tree from New England wetland plants is about $16 a tree, which I know sounds very low. We were shocked, but that's what's on.
Gosh,
their
where is that?
wholesale
Tell me, I'm gonna
website.
write that down, so
It's New England Wetland Plants in Hadley. They're a native plant nursery, newp.com.
And what's the caliper that you buy for that?
They have it as a vertical height.
Oh, they don't talk
4
about
to 6
calipers.
feet.
The money's in the caliper.
So they're, if we look at a red maple, a 6 foot tall tree is $15.
Yeah, with, they could be a 1-inch or a 1/2-inch caliper. Well, anyway, it's about the caliper. It's not, yeah, you can go out and, buy little tiny trees to replace for $15, but it's not you're talking a lot of calipers here. It's a few $100s to buy a 2 to 4-inch caliper, oak tree. But anyway, that's all I have to say to that.
all right.
You said 100?
No, it would be a few $100s
Few hundred.
to buy a 2 to 4-inch caliper oak, easy.
So remind me, what was the total amount of estimated over the project to be contributed to the tree fund?
21,000.
21,000, okay. So let's just say, so that's, and we're talking, you're roughly estimating 250 trees,
Yeah, I'm using 250,
okay?
and I'm looking at,
I mean, obviously, if they had to pay what they're really worth, they wouldn't have any money left, but, you know, you gotta have some kind of compromise, I guess.
Per tree.
trees.
$84 per tree.
Where?
That's the math.
Ah, that's, hang on, we're looking. Trees. Yeah, I see what you mean. They're only listed here in terms of height, which is, we run into this problem a lot when replacement trees are offered for mitigation purposes and trying to understand the difference between caliper and height or bucket size or any other ways that,
And I will say, you know, many, you know, when towns plant shade trees or other trees, they do, right, they're planting them for the purpose of their canopy, of the shade of those specific services. So a larger tree is often selected, or at a park, you know,
This is
a
the
large
website
tree is
she's
usually
talking about. Take a look at
selected,
this.
a large caliper size. In restoration plantings, however, trees do establish better, not when they're so tiny as like such as you know, a whip,
The argument.
but
we hear that all the
Smaller
time.
trees, they do better.
small trees
Yeah.
do
But as
establish.
far as the value goes,
Better.
it's not replacement.
Well, remember that this is, the tree replacement fund is designed to
Right.
purchase trees to plant. So,
So with,
and it's the town doing it, so they're not gonna go to Crockers, you know, they're not.
so the town would not be charging, they would,
They would be paying.
the labor would
Well,
be free.
Crockers, they'd be-
The labor would be free
Yeah,
on,
right.
so the labor, there would be no labor costs to plant and care for the trees because,
Oh, yeah.
They could use, they normally use AmeriCorps.
Well, the labor will be certainly more than the $15 tree.
right, that's my, where I'm
A
going.
lot
here
less
is
labor
what-
than if you had to plant a 2 to 4 inch caliper tree.
Is there an additional cost here that we're not considering?
Well,
But if the town is
if
performing-
they're averaging 80 something or dollars for a tree, that would include for a little tree, that would include labor for a little, you know, not gonna take much to plant that.
It's the watering over 3 years.
Watering. Yep.
So I have a question on the number of trees described in the buffer zone to the Cranberry Bog section of what we got in Dropbox. From your sampling, Adrian, you looked at approximately 207 trees to remove from your review. 69 would stay, and an additional 115 would be determined in the field. So that 115 could result in another 75, 0 to 100, you know, it would be a 0 to 115 additional trees. So I wonder if there should be something indicated that final determination of the contribution would be based on actual removal? Or do we just go with the 250 trees? It's a question.
Right. I thought we were heading ultimately towards a post-project tree
Under
removal
discuss.
count.
Yes, we are proposing to provide you with a full post-project tree removal count.
Right, at which point we could theoretically determine contribution to the tree fund, more accurately at least.
If we went with a per tree cost, yes, the
Yeah.
complication is that because the town is seeking grant funding from Mass DOT and FAA, they put in a grant application and receive that funding, and it's very challenging to go back and say, well, we told you the mitigation was 11,000, but actually we need 13,000.
Right, okay.
So that's why the airport prefers an area-based contribution so that they can get the money once with the least administrative effort and cost for the town, since ultimately it's the town going to get the grant funding and the town dispersing that money to this tree fund.
Okay. Understood. I do, though, in my head is the question of what the total cost of planting and caring for the tree might
There
realistically
is
be.
Yep, there's a document that we did reference it's posted on mass.gov. It's from the Citizen Forester from the Department of Conservation and Recreation. And it says that the total preparation, unloading, and planting costs for a tree is approximately $11. These costs are low, we feel, so we did not
Good.
not propose that value. They are 2018 dollars, not 2024 dollars, and even some of those say, there's certain estimated cost per hour for planting, and so we're proposing a value much higher than $11.
The only thing that concerns me is just the precedence, because if someone violates and cuts down trees on their coastal bank for a view, right, and then, when they're in violation, they're cutting down, trees, and then what do we tell them? Okay,
They have to replant trees on their property.
But yeah, but it's a 1-inch caliper tree they can buy for $15.
Well,
I mean, this-
that's what we have, there's a lot of back and forth about the size of those replacement trees. And you've been participating in some of that as we push back on
Right.
some of the whips that are
I always
proposed.
thought it was the value of the trees that would be cut.
Yeah. There's a lot of.
I
there's a-
would
yeah.
I just
ahead.
would like to interject because obviously this is an important question, but we do have a full mitigation package here. This is not we are only doing the donation, right? There's costs to the airport for mitigation related to the additional invasive species management, and then those other, the invasive species management within the ARA, the reporting and monitoring. So it's not the tree cost is not the only mitigation component on the table.
Right.
Okay, Karen has her hand up. Go ahead, Karen.
Have they already applied for this grant and put in that 11,000 or 21,000 as, what they need for the mitigation for the tree fund?
No,
Oh, okay.
no,
So
but
they
that
could
grant
ask
would.
for more.
Yes, the grant will be submitted after permits are issued because the grant needs to take into account the cost of construction or the cost of the tree removal. And so it does need to involve things such as, hand cutting certain areas and, other considerations in the order of conditions.
Okay, well, I have two thoughts. One is, first of all, trees that are in the NDZ, 0 to 50, we have a 2-to-1 ratio for that. So for each of those trees, technically, 2 other trees need to be planted or accounted for. And I'm wondering if when we have a real count of the number of trees that are being removed, let's say they say and we accept they're contributing $21,000 to the tree fund. Can the airport or the airport commission then, if we determine that more needs to be done given the amount of trees that have been taken out and where they were located, which determines our 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 ratio, could we at that point deal with how to manage the fact that there's a gap?
I would defer to Mark on that. I'm not sure about going back for state or federal funding versus the town allocating additional funds.
Hi, this is Marco Tariano from Gale Associates. This is something that we'd have to discuss with the FAA and Mass DOT. if that were to come up, get concurrence from the town and the airport commission for any of that. So we can't make any guarantees on what might happen post-construction for any funding, but we can certainly have a discussion about that. But we at this point, we can't really make any guarantees on that.
But if we are going to our own commission, airport commission in our own town and our own, I understand airport FAA maybe has to get involved, but the airport, and maybe they do for the airport commission. If we're going to two entities that are within our own town, they have to go back to the DOT and FAA?
So I don't want to get into too far into the sort of the monetary part of the airport commission,
Right.
but anything, the airport commission is a budget, and anything above and beyond that, they would need to talk to the town about. And I am not
Right.
up to date on the financials of the airport commission, so I'm not going to speak about that today.
And neither
but
am I.
It's
Right.
so I know what I know, and I'm gonna stick to that.
I'm just floating it as
Yep.
a question / idea.
Well, I think there's a number of
they could help us.
unknowns that you have with terms of
Exactly.
what the FAA and DOT would allow. Similarly, we have an unknown that you can hear the concerns that if we were to agree on a per acre, and then having done some calculations that, at 250 trees, 20,000, at $80 a tree gets you the 20,000, and that feels about okay. But if it turns out that there were 800 trees removed, then we have this gap that we can't figure out a way to close. So I think we need to also talk to some town folks about that. Somehow, this gets very circular. So I'm looking at the clock. Adrian, I believe you have a commitment at 2 o'clock?
I do, so I would like to just
Yeah.
summarize
Yep,
quickly. It
go ahead.
sounds like the Conservation Commission accepts the proposed areas of additional non-ARA vegetation invasive species management. So we will revise the draft invasive species management report to include this total area and resubmit that as a final invasive species control plan.
Okay.
And then the Conservation Commission will continue to consider this other $7,500 per acre contribution to the fund, and we will reconvene on that at the next
Yep.
hearing. But that this is so with all of the items that are already agreed upon, the additional invasive species and the contribution, that is the full mitigation package
Okay.
being proposed
Understood.
at this time.
Understood. We have that. Okay, with that, I think we will try to have to continue to June 12th, which is our next
Okay.
available date. We do have some other matters pending on that date, which we will schedule first. So you'll be notified where we think that you'll be coming up on the agenda, so you don't have to sit through an hour or two of other matters. And then see if we can finish this up on June 12th to get ready for a decision by the 26th, which we are still working on that schedule.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, Karen, do you want to,
Yes, I move that we continue this notice of intent for the airport to June 12th, 2024.
Gordon, second.
roll call? Bob?
Aye.
Elise?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so that is 6:12. Okay. We will all think about this, and we will also come together to review all the submissions that have come in the last few days, bringing us back to those original questions of what is the scope of the project and the impact and things like that, and try to finalize all that as well. All right? All right.
Okay.
Thank you all very much. See you on
Thank you.
June 12th.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
move that we adjourn.
Gordon, second.
Aye.
I move we adjourn.
Okay, we,
Yeah, aye.
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 Eric,
Aye.
Karen, All right, we're adjourned.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye, guys.